Welcome to another deep dive. Everybody seems to be talking about these unexplained drone sightings lately. So we're going to dive into that today.
Yeah.
You've all been sending in tons of articles and forum discussions. And let me tell you, things get pretty wild.
Oh, yeah.
We're going to try to figure out what we know, what's real, what's maybe just hype, and why everybody's kind of freaking out about this. What do you say? Are you ready to decode this whole thing with us?
Absolutely. Unidentified objects in our airspace, it always gets people's imaginations going.
Yeah.
But the number of these sightings, and they just keep happening. That's raising some really important questions about our security and how good our surveillance really is. So, yeah.
Let's unpack this whole thing.
Yeah, let's unpack it. We know these things have been going on for at least 3 years now,
Yeah.
right? And it seems like it started around military bases, but now they're popping up everywhere.
Yeah.
Like Langley Air Force Base. They've had these drone visits for 3 Christmases in a row now.
But it's not just military bases anymore. We've got reports from New Jersey, Massachusetts, Texas, Florida, California, Ohio, Pennsylvania. Even Patterson Air Force Base had to shut down last Friday because of these things. It's like they're playing whack-a-mole with us.
Yeah, and it's that timing too,
Yeah.
right? Like around the holidays when maybe security's a little more relaxed.
You're right. It's not random. These drones seem to be going to places that are strategically important. And then that timing around the holidays, it adds like another layer to this whole thing.
If they're trying to tell us something.
Okay, so speaking of theories, let's talk about the one that I've been seeing everywhere online, and the one that honestly has been keeping me up at night.
Okay.
The missing nuke theory.
Yeah.
You know that whole thing about a nuke that maybe went missing from Ukraine, and these drones are like searching for it?
Right.
It sounds like something out of a movie, but honestly, I was kind of freaked out when I first read it.
I can definitely see why that would cause some concern. But let's look at why that theory is probably not what's going on. First, if we're talking about detecting nukes, usually that's done with teams on the ground that are searching for radiation. It's not really something you'd use drones for, so especially when you think about how high up these drones are reportedly flying.
Okay.
And then you got another thing. Nuclear weapons are built with this gamma radiation shielding, and that makes them super hard to find from the air.
Okay.
And here's another thing to think about. If there actually was a real threat that a nuke was missing, the people who work in those WMD detection units, they would be in emergency mode, right? And they're not.
Okay, that does make me feel a little bit better.
Yep.
Knowing that stuff about the detection makes that nuke theory seem a lot less likely. But if these drones aren't ours, then why can't we figure out who's flying them, where they're coming from, or like what kind of technology they're even using?
Right? That's the million-dollar question here. And the big part of what's making this so difficult is that it seems like these drones are coming from over the ocean. We've got people like senior congressmen, Coast Guard personnel, law enforcement, all saying that these things are coming from over the ocean.
From over the ocean, so they're just like appearing out of the water?
Well, not exactly. They're not just magically appearing. They can be detected on radar and with optical systems, but they fly really low, like they're skimming the surface of the ocean. And that makes tracking them back to where they came from almost impossible.
So it's like trying to follow footprints on the beach, but the waves keep washing them away. You see the signs, but then they're gone.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
But here's what I don't get. If we can detect them even a little bit, then why haven't we caught one of these things? And how are they staying hidden for so long? This is where that whole advanced technology theory comes in, right?
Yeah, this is where it gets really interesting. And the fact that they can fly so low and stay under the radar for so long, it makes you think that maybe they're using some pretty high-tech stuff that we haven't seen before.
So are we talking about technology that's way beyond what we have, like some next-level spy tech that we don't even know about?
It's definitely possible. One thing that really stands out is the sheer number of these drones. We're not talking about a handful here. It could be hundreds, maybe even thousands of these things. And they don't seem to be just flying around randomly. There are reports of them doing this weird thing called swarming. They'll fly in a tight formation together and then spread out.
Yeah.
Like they're talking to each other and coordinating their movements.
Hold on, swarming drones.
Yeah.
That's taking this from like spooky to straight up sci-fi.
It is pretty wild.
Yeah.
And it suggests a level of autonomy and control that's pretty advanced.
Okay, so what about this signature management thing I keep reading about?
Yeah.
How is it possible that something can be flying around and our systems can't even pick it up?
Yeah, that's another thing that's got people scratching their heads. We have reports from law enforcement and even the pilots who responded to those Langley incidents. They said their infrared systems couldn't lock onto these drones. So it seems like they're using some kind of technology that masks their heat signature, making them practically invisible.
But wait a minute, even electric motors, they make heat, right? That's like basic physics, so how are they doing that?
You're exactly right. Stored energy, when it's used, creates heat. To make something completely disappear from heat sensors would take a level of tech that we haven't even heard of publicly. Even the stealth technology we have now, which uses special materials and engine designs to reduce heat. It can't get rid of it completely.
Okay.
So yeah, how these drones are doing this, it's a real mystery.
Okay, so let's recap. We've got these things flying in coordinated swarms. They might be using some crazy advanced tech to avoid detection, and they're coming from over the ocean, which makes it almost impossible to figure out where they're coming from. It's like trying to catch a ghost.
It really is.
But it's not just that we can't track them. It's that they're doing things in the air that we don't even know are possible. It's like a double whammy of what the heck is going on. And honestly, it's super frustrating to see this happening, and no one seems to be able to do anything about it. Why aren't we sending jets after these things? We're just shooting them down. This has been going on for years.
It makes sense to feel that way. You see something that could be dangerous in your airspace, and you want it gone.
Right?
Right. But there's this whole web of legal stuff and bureaucratic hurdles that makes it really hard to react quickly in a situation like this. Now, a big part of it has to do with something called airspace classification.
Airspace classification. What does that have to do with drones?
So most of these drone sightings are happening in what's called Class G airspace.
Mm-hmm.
And this is basically uncontrolled airspace, usually at lower altitudes, away from big airports. You can think of it like the Wild West of the sky. It's harder to say who's in charge and who can do what when something happens there.
So because it's not happening right over a major airport or in restricted airspace, it creates this legal gray area.
Exactly. And to make things even more complicated, the authorities are working under the assumption that if these drones aren't being flown by like a foreign enemy, then the people flying them are probably U.S. citizens. And that adds a whole other layer of legal stuff to deal with.
Wait, so are you saying that because they might be Americans flying these things, we can't track them down or listen in on their communications, even if they're flying around sensitive military bases? That seems kind of crazy.
I know it might seem counterintuitive,
Mm-hmm.
but that's how it seems to work right now. Under the law, if you want to tap into communications or intercept signals from someone who might be a U.S. citizen, you need to get a warrant. And getting that warrant is a whole process.
So how complicated are we talking about?
Well, reportedly, it involves filing this 120-page report.
Yeah.
And then that report has to go all the way up to the Deputy Attorney General of the United States. This is a long process.
Right.
And it's definitely not designed to deal with something that's changing so fast, like this drone situation. Plus, even if they did get a warrant, there's no guarantee that these drones are even sending out signals that we could intercept. They could be using completely self-contained systems that don't need any outside communication.
Yeah.
So basically, our traditional ways of tracking them might not even work.
So we're stuck in this catch-22. We need a warrant to even figure out if these drones are doing something illegal. But getting a warrant takes forever, and it might not even help us in the end. So what about the military? They must have more power to deal with something like this, right?
You'd think so, right? But even the people in charge of those military bases, they have limits on what they can do. They can't just send jets out to chase these things or shoot them down. They need permission from the Secretary of Defense. And the Secretary of Defense isn't going to give permission unless there's really solid proof that the drones are a threat.
And I'm guessing that proof is pretty hard to get when you can't even figure out who's flying these things or what they're doing.
It's a tough situation.
Yeah.
And then there's always that worry about what might happen if something goes wrong. What if we shoot down a drone and the debris falls on a town? What if it turns out that the drone was being flown by an American and they weren't doing anything illegal? The legal and political consequences could be huge. So there's a lot of hesitation to take any drastic action. It's a delicate situation for sure.
Okay, so we've got the legal stuff, the bureaucratic stuff, the fear of political backlash, and the possibility of causing accidental damage. All of that is leading to this very cautious approach. But that still doesn't explain why nothing has been done. Has there ever been a time when one of these drones was shot down?
There have been people calling for it, definitely. Just a couple of days ago, New Jersey lawmakers held this big press conference. They were saying the government needs to shoot one of these drones down so we can finally figure out what we're dealing with. But so far, it doesn't seem like anyone's done that. It's like everyone's waiting for someone else to make the first move.
It's like a stalemate. We don't know enough to take any action, but we can't get more information without taking some action.
Exactly.
It's so frustrating.
I know. It's definitely a tricky situation.
Well, one thing's for sure. This is one deep dive that's left me with more questions than answers. We've talked about missing nukes, super advanced technology, legal loopholes, and all this bureaucratic red tape.
Yeah.
But honestly, knowing why no one's done anything about this is almost as interesting as the drones themselves. Would you agree?
Oh, absolutely. This whole situation really shows how complicated it is to deal with things we don't recognize in our airspace, especially when you add in all the advanced technology and potential legal problems. It's a whole new level of mystery in the sky.
It's like a mystery novel where the clues just keep getting weirder.
That's a good way to put it.
And it's something that we definitely need to investigate more and be more transparent about. I think the public deserves to know what's going on.
Definitely.
Yeah.
It's a story that's clearly not over yet,
Yeah.
and there's a lot more to uncover.
But before we get too far ahead of ourselves, let's take a minute to think about everything we've learned so far. What stood out to you the most in all of this?
You know what's really interesting to me? It's how all these different things are coming together. The technology, the legal challenges, the potential global consequences. It's not just about some unidentified objects in the sky. It's like we're getting a glimpse into a future where technology is pushing the limits of our laws and our systems and forcing us to change how we think about things.
It's like we're seeing behind the curtain of something much bigger, something we're just starting to understand.
Exact.
But we're not done yet. We've got a lot more to uncover in this deep dive. So stick with us as we explore even more about this whole drone mystery.
Stay tuned. This whole thing really makes you think about how we think about our airspace.
Right.
Like we're used to having all the answers. We like to feel like we're in control. And then these drones come along and they're messing with all of that.
It's like we're in a chess game, but we don't even know the rules. And yeah, you're right. It's not just about the tech itself. It's about how we deal with things we don't understand. How do you keep people safe but also protect individual rights? And how do you deal with all these legal gray areas when technology is changing so fast?
It's tough.
Yeah.
Our systems are kind of old school. They're made for a different time. And they're not really built to keep up with all this new stuff.
Yeah.
We need a more flexible way of handling all these weird things we're seeing in the sky.
Okay, but let's just play devil's advocate here for a second.
Yeah.
What if these drones are ours? What if this is all some big secret government project and they're just trying to throw us off the scent?
It's a theory that a lot of people are talking about. And it's not totally impossible. I mean, governments do have secrets, especially when it comes to new technology.
But wouldn't someone have said something by now? We're talking about a lot of drones flying around for years. Someone somewhere would have spilled the beans.
You'd think so, right? But governments can be really good at keeping secrets. They're like experts at compartmentalizing information. Plus, the people who work on those top secret programs, they're super loyal and they know the rules. And the consequences for leaking stuff are pretty serious. So, yeah, maybe only a tiny group of people even knows the whole story.
Okay, that's a good point. So let's pretend for a minute that these drones are part of some secret government project. What would be the point? What would be so important that they'd risk all this speculation and anxiety?
Well, if we're going to go down that road, there are a few things that come to mind. Maybe it's some kind of super advanced surveillance program, like something way beyond what we can even imagine.
Like Big Brother in the sky, always watching.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
It would fit with all the stuff we hear about big data and all that.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe it's something a little less creaky, like they're doing some kind of atmospheric research or testing out new engines. But the scale of this thing and all the secrecy around it, it makes it seem like it's something more important, something that could affect national security.
I don't know. Flying these things over cities and military bases and even over LaGuardia Airport, that doesn't exactly scream harmless science experiment to me.
You're not wrong. And the fact that they're doing this in a way that bends the rules, instead of just being honest about what they're doing, it makes it seem like they're trying to avoid attention. Maybe from the public, maybe from other countries who might not like what they're seeing.
Okay, so let's go back to the tech for a second. If these drones are ours, and they're really as advanced as they seem, wouldn't that give us a huge advantage? I mean, we're talking about tech. That could change everything.
Oh.
How we fight wars, how we do surveillance, everything.
It's a tricky thing. On the one hand, yeah, having that kind of tech would put us ahead of the game in a lot of ways. But on the other hand, the fact that these things are flying around with no one really knowing who's in charge or what they're doing, that's a bit of a problem, don't you think?
What kind of problem?
Well, think about what could happen if that tech got into the wrong hands, like another country that doesn't like us, or a terrorist group, or even just some random person who wants to cause trouble.
It's like something out of a nightmare. Robot drones attacking everyone, and we don't even know who's controlling them.
It's not a pleasant thought. And it brings up an even bigger question. How ethical is all of this?
Yeah.
Who gets to decide how this tech gets used? How do we make sure it doesn't get abused? These are things we really need to be talking about as a society.
Absolutely. But right now, it feels like we're not even asking the right questions, let alone getting any answers. We're stuck in this loop of guessing and denying, and no one seems to be getting any closer to the truth.
It can be frustrating. But the fact that people are talking about this, that they want answers, that's a good sign. It means we haven't given up. We still care about what's happening around us. And hopefully all this mystery will lead to something good, like a more open and honest discussion about how technology is changing our lives.
You know, you're right. For all the stress and uncertainty this is causing, it is good to see people engaged, asking questions, demanding some transparency. It means we still have that sense of wonder and curiosity.
It's what makes us human.
But before we go too far down that road, there's one big question we haven't really addressed. What are these drones trying to do? What's their goal?
That's the question, isn't it?
Ah.
And honestly, we just don't have enough info to say for sure. But we can look at the patterns, how they're behaving, what they can do, and maybe make some educated guesses.
Okay, let's do it.
Yeah.
What do you see when you look at all the evidence?
Well, the fact that they've been doing this for years, mostly around military bases and other important places, it makes you think they're up to something strategic. They're not just out for a joyride. They're gathering intel, testing our defenses, maybe even getting ready for something bigger.
Getting ready for what? Come on, don't leave me hanging.
I'm just saying that all this points to a plan, something long-term, something that goes beyond just spying or messing with us.
So are you saying that these drones, whoever they belong to, are part of some bigger game that we're not even aware of? Like we're pawns on a chessboard and we don't even see the players?
It's a possibility we should think about. The world's a complicated place. Lots of different people trying to get ahead. And these drones with all their fancy tech and their mystery agenda, they could be part of that game.
Pawns expert speaker. You're starting to sound like one of those conspiracy guys on YouTube.
I assure you, I'm just looking at the facts and trying to put the pieces together. Sometimes the truth can be pretty strange.
Okay,
Right.
okay, I get it. We gotta keep an open mind, even if things sound a little crazy. But honestly, the more we learn about these drones, the less I feel like I understand. It's like peeling an onion. You just find more layers.
That's how it goes with the unknown. The more you learn, the more you realize how much you don't know. But that's what makes it so interesting, don't you think? It's that journey, that search for answers, that keeps us going.
You're right. It's the mystery that keeps us hooked. But I'm not gonna lie, I'm starting to feel a little overwhelmed with all this. I need a minute to process it all.
I hear you. It's a lot to take in.
So today we've covered a ton of stuff. From missing nukes to advanced tech legal hurdles and even the idea of a secret government program. We've talked about different theories and tried to make sense of it all, but it's clear that we're still in the dark about a lot of things. But what I find really interesting is how this whole situation is making us rethink our ideas about technology and security and even our place in the world.
It's like a wake-up call.
Yeah.
These drones are telling us that the world is changing fast and we need to adapt.
It's like we're at the edge of a new frontier and we have no idea what's out there. But we can't just stand here waiting for answers to fall out of the sky. We got to keep asking questions, keep digging, and keep talking about this stuff.
Couldn't agree more. This isn't something that's going to just disappear. We need to stay informed, stay engaged,
Yeah.
and be ready to face the challenges that all this new tech is throwing at us.
So where do we go from here? We've looked at the evidence, the possibilities, all the unknowns, but what does this mean for us, for the everyday people just living their lives? Should we be worried? Should we be looking over our shoulders every time we hear a buzzing sound?
It's understandable to feel a little uneasy when you're dealing with the unknown, especially when it could be something as disruptive as these drones. But it's important to remember that fear often comes from not knowing. The more we understand about what's going on, the better prepared we'll be to deal with it.
So knowledge is power.
Exactly. And that's why these deep dives are so important. By exploring all the angles separating fact from fiction, we can have informed discussions, demand transparency from our leaders, and advocate for the responsible use of these technologies.
You know, you're right. I started this deep dive feeling anxious and confused, even a little scared. But now I feel, well, not exactly relaxed, but definitely more informed, more in control. It's like I have a better handle on the situation, even with all the unanswered questions.
That's what knowledge can do. It replaces fear with understanding. It gives us the tools to deal with a world that's always changing.
Well said. And, you know, as much as I love a good mystery, I think it's time we try to get some real answers. We've talked a lot about the what and the why, but now I want to talk about the who. Who's behind these drones, and what are they really up to? All right, so we've gone deep on these drone sightings, expert speaker. We've talked about the tech, the legal stuff, even some pretty out there theories. But the big question is who's flying these things?
That's the one we all want answered, isn't it? We can look at all the data, speculate all day long. But until we know who's behind it all, It's just a big puzzle with missing pieces.
You got that right. So let's put on our detective hats. If we ditch the missing nuke theory, which I think we've pretty much done, we're left with two main options. These drones are either part of some super secret government project,
Yeah.
or they belong to somebody else, someone who wants to stay hidden.
Right. And each option opens up a whole new can of worms.
Okay, so let's start with option one, top secret government operation. If these drones are ours, what are they doing? And why all the secrecies? I mean, it's causing a lot of stress and feeding all these crazy conspiracy theories. Wouldn't it be easier to just come clean?
It might seem that way,
Yeah.
but governments are all about secrets and advantages. If this is a black budget program, letting everyone know what they're doing could risk the technology, the mission, national security even.
So they're playing their cards close to the vest.
Exactly. And if the tech is as advanced as it seems, they definitely want to keep it under wraps. Maybe they're testing new capabilities, gathering intelligence in ways we can't even imagine, or getting a leg up for future conflicts.
Okay, that makes sense. But what about option two, the mystery player? If these drones aren't ours, then who do they belong to and what do they want? Are we talking about another country showing off their tech skills? A rogue group with an agenda? Or something we haven't even thought of?
This is where things get really interesting. And without solid proof, it's all just guesswork. But let's throw some ideas around. If it's another country, maybe they're testing our defenses, seeing how we react, or even sending a message.
A message like, hey, look what we can do, but you'll never prove it was us.
Exactly. It could be a way of saying, we're ahead of you, without starting a fight.
Right.
Or they could be spying on our military, our infrastructure, our politics even.
So getting ahead without firing a shot.
Right. And because these drones are operating in this gray area legally, where it's hard to say who they belong to, it makes it really hard for us to do anything about it. It's like that saying, fight fire with fire, but we don't even know where the fire's coming from.
So that's countries.
Yeah.
What about groups that aren't governments, like terrorists or some high-tech criminal gang? Could it be them?
It's possible. Criminal organizations are getting really good with technology. And think about all the ways they could use drones. Smuggling, spying, even attacks. And as drone tech gets cheaper and easier to find, the chances of it being used for bad stuff go way up.
It's kind of scary when you think about it. This technology is out there, and who knows who's going to get their hands on it and what they'll do with it.
That's the problem. And that's why it's so important to talk about this, to understand what these new technologies mean, and to make sure we have laws and rules that can keep up with them.
So it's not just about catching these drones, it's about understanding the bigger picture, what's driving this whole tech race, and what it means for the future.
Exactly. These drone sightings, they're just a small part of a much bigger change. The lines between war spying and crime are getting blurry, and it's all because of technology that's getting more powerful and easier to get.
It's like a whole new world with a whole new set of rules. So where do we go from here? What can we as regular people do in this crazy new world?
First, we need to understand what we're dealing with, the technologies, the threats, how they can be used for bad stuff.
Knowledge is power, right?
Exactly. The more we know, the less we'll be afraid, and we'll be in a better position to demand answers from our leaders, push for responsible innovation, and protect our freedoms in a world that's changing faster than ever.
You know what? You're right. This whole deep dive has been a real eye-opener. It's made me realize that this drone thing is just the beginning. We're facing a whole new wave of technological challenges, and we need to be ready for them.
I agree. The future is happening right now, and we all have a part in shaping it.
I like that. That's a great takeaway for our listeners. So to everyone out there who's been following this drone story, keep asking questions. Keep demanding answers. Stay curious. The truth is out there, but we have to work to find it.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And as always, we'll be here on the Deep Dive, helping you understand these complex issues and exploring the unknown.
Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and keep your eyes on the skies. You never know what you might see.